alshareef.com/donate.
And he's in charge of tending to sheep. So he takes all the sheep out to the the mountainside, and the sheep are grazing and whatnot. And then this boy, there's like a little pond there. So the boy leaves the sheep and he goes swimming. So he's having fun, he's enjoying himself, and while he's swimming, a wolf comes. And it doesn't eat one of the sheep, it eats one sheep, and it eats the second one, the third one. It has like the biggest buffet it ever had in its life. It eats the entire flock. And so he finishes swimming, he dries himself off, gets up, and he sees the entire flock is wiped out. And he said, the hasra is this boy going back to his master to tell him what had happened, saying that he's lost the entire flock. And you'll see that in war times, for example, someone going in with a battalion of airplanes, going in with 17, 20 airplanes, and having their entire group be killed, and only like the general coming back. And the sadness, people would retire after that, after they've lost so many people, the hasra. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, أَن تَقُولَ نَفْسٌ يَا حَسْرَةً. The person will come back on the day of judgment, يَا حَسْرَةً. This is what he'll have, but of course, that'll be the day of judgment. Just to give you like a little glimpse of what it's like, a very tiny glimpse, to come back on that day without preparing the proper good deeds. Yahya ibn Mu'adh, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that the most naive thing in my eyes is to linger in sin with no regrets, hoping for a far-off pardon. Naive? You know what the word naive means? Ignorant? Not necessarily ignorant. Naive. Like if I told you, I'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn for $50, huh? Gullible, naive, and you'll be like, $50, right? That's a great deal. Here it is. You put it in, I'm like, okay, thanks, and then I'm gone, and then you go to New York to pick up your bridge, and it's not there. Right? Naive. He's saying that someone like dumb like this is someone who wants to continue doing sins, and he just hopes that later on in life, he's just going to be forgiven by Allah. He doesn't care. Like he's just going through life, doing his stuff, doing whatever he wants, and then one day Allah's just going to forgive him for everything, and everything will be happy. He says that's the most naive person in my eye. The most gullible, the dumbest person is this guy. Don't use that word for other people. And then he said, and to hope, the naive person, the gullible person, is to hope to come closer to Allah without doing anything. To think that you're going to come closer to Allah, and that your iman is going to just zoom up by doing nothing. It's just going to miraculously just fall down upon you, bang you in the head. And then to await the harvest of Jannah with the seeds of hellfire. Like he's planting seeds of hellfire his entire life, and then when he dies he's hoping to go to Jannah, waiting for reward without doing any good deeds. And subhanAllah, sometimes, I don't know if you've heard of the ruling, and there's a lot of scholars here, but there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars, that is someone who doesn't pray, are they Muslim or not? There's a difference among the scholars, a very deep difference of opinion. Some of the scholars say that if someone doesn't pray, they're not Muslim anymore. If they're the 5 Salah, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, if they stop praying, they're not Muslim. I said there's difference of opinion. Other people say that they're still Muslim, but they're just lazy Muslims and they're in big trouble, but they're still Muslims. Other people say they should be treated like kuffar. They should be treated like kuffar, and they took it to the point where they say that they should even be buried in the cemetery of the kuffar, because they died like this, for not praying. And it's a very serious issue. I remember asking a sheikh, I studied in Medina University, or I didn't ask him, sorry, someone else asked him. They said that, my father, he passed away, and I'd like to do Hajj for him this year. Can I do Hajj for him knowing that he never used to pray? He never did his salah. And the sheikh said, and these are from the older shuyukh in Medina, he said, you don't have to do Hajj for him. If he didn't pray, there's no Hajj for him because he died a non-Muslim. That's serious. Right, I'm thinking, where am I going? Okay, so with that ruling, subhanAllah, there was another older lady that she's asking about, her husband. She wants to do Hajj for him also. And then this issue came up. She said he never used to pray. And I thought to myself, subhanAllah, like, we think that we can just live our lives doing anything we want, and when someone dies, we can just make a good, lecture and recite Quran. And subhanAllah, you'll see people that don't normally come to the masjid, like at their funeral, kind of like the people that come to the funeral. I remember, subhanAllah, in Washington, D.C., there's a sister that passed away. And they said there's going to be janazah at Dhuhr time. I'm like, fine. I wasn't like dressed properly. I was like working at the school, and it was summertime. And then I was shocked when Dhuhr time came. You had like Sheikh Jafar Adri, Sheikh Al-Fawzan, all these scholars were there, and the masjid was packed as if it was like a Jummah prayer. And I'm basically wearing my pajamas because we're working in the school in the summer, and I was like, what's going on here? And there was a huge crowd for this sister, and Sheikh Fawzan gave a lecture. I don't think Sheikh Fawzan is here. And then they took her to the janazah, and even her non-Muslim relatives who were sitting in the back, they said that when we die, we want to be buried like this too. And they're non-Muslim. And the reason they were saying, I asked her, like, who was this lady, and how did she evoke such strong emotions from everybody? They said that she was like one of the strongest Muslims in Washington, D.C. And she started practicing like Quran and Sunnah, from 20, 30 years ago. And she was one of the key people to bring the proper understanding of Quran and Sunnah to many of the people in the Washington, D.C. area, inside the D.C. area. And a lot of the people actually learned and studied or came closer to the correct deen through her. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed her. You can see that in her death. There's a poetry line, actually. Do you guys like poetry? No, not that much. Music is poetry, right? They try putting the songs together, but anyhow. There's a poetry line that says, تَرْجُ النَّجَاةَ وَلَمْ تَسْلُكْ مَسَالِكُهَا إِنَّ السَّفِينَةَ لَا تَجْرِي عَلَى الْيَبَسِ, which means that you hope to be forgiven, you hope for redemption, but you haven't traveled the path of that redemption. You haven't traveled that path of that forgiveness. Boats don't travel in the desert. And you have to take your boat and you have to put it in the proper water for it to get to its destination. SubhanAllah, I gave this lecture like a long time ago, and remember in the beginning, for those who were here, we had a little activity where we were thinking, putting ourselves into the seat of someone who's actually got into a car accident this morning on the way to Masjid Noor's conference, and what kind of things they would see, hear, and feel in the ambulance. And so we talk about these things. SubhanAllah, Allah gave me a taste of this. And it was actually September 11th, the week right after September 11th, September 18th, on a Tuesday, at like about 12 in the afternoon. I was leaving the school, and I went to do some supply shopping for my classes. And subhanAllah, in a split second, my life could have been over. I was crossing an intersection. There's a very busy like highway kind of going through this town, and I was crossing the intersection, going across like this, like 8 lanes. And they actually have like speed bumps for people that are coming down this hill, because they're coming in at very high speeds. So all I remember is my eyes turning like this as I was crossing. And I thought to myself, like, am I going through the red light? And then I'm in the hospital. Just like that, in a second. And even that thing about the red light, I actually had to remember that afterwards. Maybe, the next day, I was remembering what had actually happened. But what had happened was, this lady was a female driver. She had gone through the red light at a very high speed, maybe 60 miles an hour, at least. And actually all she did was hit the back of the car. Swerved, hit the back of my car. But that bump in the car, it ignited the airbags. Right? In Arab countries, you don't have airbags unless you have like the newer cars. And I would have been dead by now if I was in Medina or something. The airbag came out. The airbag comes out so swiftly that it knocked me unconscious. So the airbag went wham, hit me in the head, and I fell into concussion. but the car is still moving forward, right? So I'm unconscious, and the car is moving forward. The car swerves out, hits another car, and then goes kind of like off a little cliff and slams into a pole. My car. So the front of the car came all the way to the windshield. Right, so the entire front of the car, and it was destroyed the car. But alhamdulillah, it hit on the passenger side, not on the driver's side. So I got cut in the leg and unconscious, right? And like I said about the blood, I was talking about myself when I said it, because I had blood on my clothes, and I'm like, I felt okay, but when you see your clothes drenched in blood, you're like, something must have happened. And subhanallah, all I remember is, no, I need to go back to school. They're waiting for me. I have a class I have to teach. And the police officer's talking to me, and he's saying, just like you see in the movies, the final scene when the guy's going in, and the lights of the hospital are going on top of you, and the doctor's saying, you're really lucky you had your seatbelt on. SubhanAllah, I put the seatbelt on maybe 5 seconds before the accident. Because I'm in the habit, and it's not a good habit, and I've learned my lesson now, of starting the car and driving. Like, suppose I get in the car here, I'll drive, and then when I get to the first red light, that's when I'll put the seatbelt on. You guys have that habit? Or you guys don't drive yet? Right? Yeah, because you're bored, so you're waiting at the red light, that's when you put your seatbelt on. So I was at the red light, I had left the parking lot, went to a red light, and at the red light put the seatbelt on. And then I crossed, and then was hit like this. And then I thought to myself, the police officer was talking to me, and I couldn't reply to him. I could hear him, and I remember hearing him, but I couldn't say anything to him. And I felt what it's like, firsthand what it's like to not have control of what you say. In those final moments, you don't have control over what you say. It's impossible to say La ilaha illallah, and then you're like, okay, now I'll go to Jannah, let me just say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and everything's all happy and fine. If everything you say at that moment comes from your heart, you can't say anything off the top of your head, and you can't use your brain to make, use logic. It comes unconsciously. If you lived La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in your life, it'll come out at that time. It'll come out. And similarly, if you fill your lives with things that take you away from that La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, when that moment comes, then you might be fooled in those days. Like we said, you never know when that's going to happen. So continuing from that, I'll finish off the story for you of that the police officer. So the first one wasn't a good ending. This next one, he said, the police officer that we mentioned earlier fell back into routine, as he narrates, and started to drift away from Allah. So even as a police officer, he sees people dying every day, he's still not practicing until something happened. He said, but another event happened to him that sealed his return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he continues. He says, what an odd world. After some time, about 6 months, a strange accident took place. A young man was moving along the highway normally, but within one of the tunnels leading to the city, he was maimed by a flat tire. And so, if you've ever been to Saudi Arabia, they get these big Caprice. You know what a Caprice is? We don't have too many of them. They're American cars, but they sell them to the Saudis. Huh? Like police cars, yeah. Those, the big fat cars, and they're in Saudi. They drive them like 100 miles an hour, and there's no cops, and they just drive them everywhere. So this guy, he gets a flat tire in a tunnel. There's no side road or anything. So he's in the middle of the tunnel, and he's trying to fix his flat tire. And then another car, one of these Caprices, coming in at 100 miles an hour while he's fixing the tire. So he's opening the trunk up to get his tire out and fixing it, and this car comes and pounds him from the back. Okay. A young man was moving by the flat tire. To the side of the tunnel he parked and stepped to the back to remove the spare tire. The whistle of a speeding car from behind. In a second it collided with the crippled car, the young man in between the two of them. He fell to the ground with critical injuries. I rushed to the scene, myself and another partner other than the first one. Together we carried the young man's body into our patrol car and phoned the hospital to prepare for his arrival. He was a young adult in his blossom years, kind of like your ages. You guys drive? 16 years old? Not yet. Okay, be careful. Religious, you could tell from his appearance. He was mumbling when we carried him, but in our rush we paid no attention to what he was saying. However, when we placed him on his back in the patrol car and they drove off, we could make it out, like what he was saying. Through the pain, his heart was reciting Quran. He was so immersed in the recitation, subhanallah, you would never have said that this person was in intense pain. So this boy is in critical condition. He's in the stretcher, and he's going to his death. And the words that are coming from his heart are the surahs that he memorized. So he's reciting it. Blood has soaked his clothes crimson red. His bones had clearly snapped in several places, and to tell the truth, he looked like he was staring into the eyes of death. He continued to read in his unique, tender voice, reciting every verse in proper rhythm. In my entire life, I had never heard any recitation like it. I said to myself, I'm going to instruct him to say the Shahada just like I saw my friend doing, especially since I had previous experience. My partner and I listened intently to that soft voice. I felt the shiver shock my back and up my arm, and the hair stood. Suddenly the hymn ceased. I watched silently, so he turns around into the car and looks at the boy. As his hand rose softly. So the boy is in critical condition. He's now raising his hand. He doesn't need anybody to tell him to say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. He had his index finger pointed upward to the heavens, saying the Shahada, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Then his head slumped, and nothing. I jumped to the back seat, felt his hand, his heart, his breathing. He was dead. I couldn't stop staring at him. A tear fell, but I hid it in shame. I turned back to my partner and told him that the boy's life had ceased, and he burst out loud crying. Seeing a man cry like that, I could not control myself, and my partner faded away behind the fall of my own tears. The patrol car fogged from the emotions. We arrived at the hospital, and as we rushed through the corridors, we told all the doctors, nurses, and onlookers what had happened. So many people were affected by what we said that some stood there speechless and tearful. No one wanted to lose sight of the boy that had been assured of the time and place he would be buried, until they were assured of the time and place he would be buried. One of the hospital staff phoned the boy's home to tell them that the boy was dead. His brother picked it up and was told of the accident. His brother told us about him, and he said, this is his brother speaking about him, he used to go out every Monday to visit his only grandmother outside of town. Whenever he visited her, he made sure to spend time with the poor children idling the streets and the orphans. The town knew him. He was the one that would bring them the Islamic books and tapes. His dusty Mazda would be filled with rice and sugar and even candies. Couldn't forget the candies for those families who were in need. He would not stand for anyone to discourage him from the long journey to that town. He would always politely reply that the long drive gave him time to review his Quran and listen to Islamic lectures on his cassette deck, and that with every step to the town he hoped for the reward that he would find with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ لِمَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ, that not only is Allah forgiving, Allah is oft forgiving. Like someone who does something repeatedly. Have you ever heard of someone named Najjar? Najjar, right? It's a kind of a statement, like a butcher, someone who's always slaughtering meat. It's the same like wording in Arabic. Ghaffar is someone who's always forgiving. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghaffar. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to who? Liman tab. وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ لِمَنْ تَابَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving for those people who ask for forgiveness. Those people actually try coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِمَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ, and believe, وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, and do good deeds, ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى, and then they're guided after that. Those are the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help. And in fact, when you make the intention to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make that easy for you. Just like you've heard in the hadith, that when the person, puts his hand out to Allah, Allah puts his arm out. When the person comes walking to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes running to them. So you'll see the person tries just a little bit to come closer to Allah, and things will open up for the person. Okay, there's a joke. I'm gonna tell you a joke. Well, you want to hear a joke? It's not the time. Okay. There's a joke, and there's a joke that the Christians say. So I'm gonna modify it a little bit for this audience. There's a flood in a town. Many times it happens in North Dakota. We get floods up there. I'm from Winnipeg, actually, Manitoba. It's above North Dakota. So it's in North Dakota, the floods. And the police have asked everybody to evacuate the city. So there's a priest, and he won't evacuate because he knows God will save him. Alright, so someone drives by and they're like, "Priest, get in the car, come on. The floods are coming, you're going to drown." And he goes, No, God will save me. And then they're like, okay, and they leave him. So then, the flood waters are getting pretty deep, and it gets getting deeper and deeper. So the priest is like swimming in the water. Right? He's swimming and he's waddling around. And so these, people come by with a canoe, and they're like, come on, Reverend, get in the canoe, we'll save you and stuff. And he says, No, God will save me. Right? And it's just go, God will save me, I don't need your help. So he's swimming in this, he finds the water's getting deeper and deeper, he finds like a hill, climbs up the hill. The water's like filling, he's just right at the end, he's on the top of the highest place. The water's about to fill him. So they bring in a helicopter. They see him stranded, they put down the rope. And then they tell him, come on, Reverend, get in the rope, we'll save you. And it's his last breath, and he said, No, go. God will save me. Leave me. So they're like, okay, as the helicopter flies away.